How long do you typically go between oil changes for your C5 Corvette? Is it every 3,000 miles, every 10,000 miles, or perhaps it's when the change oil soon light comes on? You hear so many different guidelines about change intervals. Where do they get these numbers from anyway? Is it driven by the EPA? Are they plucked from air? Or perhaps it's just marketing hype? Well, we're going to dig deeper into this important question. We'll see if we can separate fiction from fact and come up with some objective and solid information that will help you to confidently decide when to change your C5's oil. We'll do all that and a whole lot more next.
Toys for Life.
Now let's see if we can shed a little bit of light on this important and highly debated question of how often you need to change the oil in your C5 Corvette. For most of my adult life, conventional wisdom has always been you need to change your oil every 3,000 miles or you're neglecting your car and it's going to wear out. So who the heck invented this magic 3,000 mile rule anyway? To try to answer that question, let's go back to the 1950s when compared to what we have today, engines were crude and oil was cruder. Pun intended, by the way. By crude, I'm really referring to the fact that engines were carbureted and they had finicky chokes, and the oil that was available was nowhere near as advanced as it is today. So what did GM say about oil changes back then? Well, looking at the 1955 Corvette Owner's Manual, it calls for oil changes every 2,000 to 3,000 miles. By 1964, that number jumped to 6,000 miles in the Corvette Owner's Manual, unless of course you drove a lot in dusty conditions, then you needed to change the oil much sooner. How much sooner? Who knows? Jumping ahead a whopping 30 years to 1994, GM was now recommending two different change intervals depending on how you typically drove your C4 Corvette. If you operated your C4 Corvette in normal conditions, you could now go an amazing 7,500 miles between oil changes. But if you were operating your C4 Corvette under severe conditions, which included things like trips that were generally always 4 miles or less, or trips that were 10 miles or less but in below freezing temperatures, or you let your C4 idle for extended periods of time, or you happen to be stuck in stop and go traffic a lot, or you operated in dusty conditions a lot, well then you needed to change your oil every 3,000 miles. And finally, by the time our beloved C5s came around, GM engineers decided that since the car's computer was monitoring so many engine parameters anyway, they might as well write a few more lines of code and have the C5's computer determine when the oil needs to be changed. Plus, having a change oil soon light staring you right in the face would be much harder to ignore than one of those little stickers in the corner of your windshield. So inside your C5's owner's manual, it states that the calculation is based upon engine RPMs and engine operating temperature, not just some oversimplified one-size-fits-all mileage number. Oh, and it does say that at an absolute minimum, you still need to change your C5's oil at least once per year. And as soon as the oil's changed, be sure to remember to reset that oil life monitor light. This is done by turning on the C5's ignition but not starting the car, and then you toggle the trip button until you get to the oil life percentage, and finally you hold and press the reset button until it resets to 100%. Now, waiting for that change oil soon light to come on seems kind of simple, but do you really trust?
Do you guys trust me?
No.
Not really. Actually, a little bit. You got this.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Waiting for your change oil light to come on? I mean, after all, there's going to be times where it goes well beyond 3,000 miles. Well, in my mind, it mainly depends upon how you use your C5 Corvette. If you typically just drive it recreationally and you rarely, if ever, go to wide open throttle, then I absolutely would rely on that little light. But if you typically drive your C5 like you stole it, hitting wide open throttle numerous times each trip, then I probably wouldn't fault you for changing your oil a little bit sooner than that light would suggest. Since my C5 is supercharged, it typically runs a lot more cylinder pressure, and supercharged engines use a richer air-to-fuel ratio. So I'm pretty confident there's a lot more unburnt fuel and soot getting into my engine oil, so I never go more than 3,000 miles. Now, most of you guys are probably naturally aspirated and drive fairly aggressively. In that situation, I probably change my oil about every 4,500 miles, or when the change oil light comes on, whatever happens first. Now, that's just my opinion. If you wanted to be 100% sure, you could always send a sample in and have it tested, and some guys do. But unless you're a professional race team, I think that's kind of overkill. Guys, I have to confess, when I started putting together these videos on C5 engine lubrication, like the video I did just a couple of weeks ago on the best type of oil for your C5 Corvette, there's a link in your upper right hand corner if you missed that. And while I was putting together this video on oil change intervals for the C5 Corvette, I grossly underestimated the amount of information that I ultimately would want to convey to you. So the final video on engine oil filters for the C5 Corvette will be coming shortly. I hope you enjoyed this video and it's given you some additional perspective on oil change intervals. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up for me so that YouTube knows to share it with the rest of the C5 community. And as always, thanks for watching.